Before we get to 1981, we have to go back a few years to 1978. John Carpenter's Halloween started a movement that would become known as the slasher genre. While Carpenter's film was a slow burn and more psychological, it still had a knife-wielding madman, or as Dr. Loomis would say, madman, which would be the inspiration for hundreds of low-budget filmmakers like Sean S. Cunningham. A couple of years later, the movement starts and we get films like The Prowler, My Bloody Valentine, and Final Exam, to name a few. Today on Drew Reviews, we talk about inarguably the greatest year for the slasher genre, as I give you my top 5 slashers of the year 1981. Alright guys, we're going to get right into it with my 5th favorite slasher of 1981. And this film was directed by Joseph Zito and actually got him the job later in Friday the 13th Part 4. I'm talking about The Prowler. I love The Prowler, and basically you're looking at a story about a soldier who, as Jeff Daniels would have said in Dumb and Dumber, got a John Deere letter, uh, ends up 35 years later coming back to this senior dance and just killing everybody for revenge. This movie has some great kills. There's a really good scene in the shower where he pitchforks this girl. There's a good scene in the pool. One of my favorite deaths is after he gets the girl in the shower, he gets her boyfriend. He stabs him in the top of the head, and as he's pulling the knife, the whites of the guy's eyes roll back, and that's just an amazing visual and just so intelligent. I love that kill. So I hadn't seen this movie until about 2018 or 19, and about 3 years ago, I started having correspondence with the drummer that plays in the band at the dance. There's a band called Nowhere Fast, and they're playing in 2 or 3 different scenes there. And so, yeah, we actually had some conversation back and forth on Facebook Messenger about how they got the part and everything. And one of the cool things he told me was that the person who did all their special effects, like he was showing them like the heads and like all the mutilated parts and everything while they were there on stage, and that was really cool. That band's no longer around anymore. They put out one LP. If you've got a record player, check it out. Nowhere Fast, all one word. Singer sounds kind of like Sting. Music's a little bit heavier than that, but yeah, I thought that'd be a cool little story to share with you guys. He seemed like a really cool guy. Um, this movie almost didn't make my list. There was a movie I just saw the other night that almost beat it out. There's some things about this movie that kind of drag it down for me. Like, it seems like they were trying to pad the runtime a little bit. There's scenes where the main girl is running back and forth from house to house, and nothing really happens in any of that time. And so that drug it down for me. One thing I did like, the sheriff reminds me of Cillian Murphy, if you know that character, which this is kind of a like who's the killer type of movie. So you're thinking, with that face and those eyes, it could possibly be him. But anyway, watch the movie. It's really good, and that's why it's here at number 5. Coming in at number 4 for me is this little movie right here. This is The Burning. Tom Savini, who did the special effects on the original Friday the 13th, was asked to come back for part 2, which we'll get to here in just a little bit, and he actually turned it down to do this movie here because he didn't understand. Jason was just the dead boy in the lake, and I'm glad he did this movie because there's some really good effects in this thing. So The Burning is a campfire revenge tale done right. Even if most of it's done on canoes and on a raft. Um, you got the story of Cropsey, this guy that he was part of this camp years before, and in a prank gone wrong, accidentally gets set on fire. He's in a burn unit for years and years, and then he comes back to get his revenge. Um, I really like the kills in this movie, especially once you get to that raft slaughter. That is amazing. Pretty good creepy vibe in this movie overall. I can dig it. It's really good. I'd put it over The Prowler for sure, just as far as just a complete coherent movie. Um, this movie gave a start to a lot of young actors like Fisher Stevens and Jason Alexander and Holly Hunter. They're all in this thing, and if there's a couple of things I could tell you I dislike about it, I felt like too many people lived in this movie. I felt maybe there was just too many to start out with, but I felt like Cropsey could have took out more. I like the character of Cropsey, but he's this guy, with this burn makeup on, and they made him more. As much as I like Tom Savini, they made him more like a mongoloid type thing, like Jason, where it should have been more like Freddy Kruegerish to me. But that's really the only knocks I have against the movie. The Burning is a very worthwhile entry to the slashers of '81. That's why it's here at number 4 for me. My third favorite slasher of 1981, and I wish this was higher because I just love this movie. Any other year, it would be number 1 or 2, but this year there were just so many, and it'd be My Bloody Valentine. Let me start off saying by Harry Warden, the miner that died, down in the mine. He is one of my favorite villains of all time. Not only, has he got one of the coolest weapons, he's just got, with the apparatus he has on his mouth, he's one of the coolest looking villains in all of slasherdom. He's got some really cool kills in this movie. The best of which is my favorite slasher movie kill of all time, where he gets the guy with the pickaxe and it goes up through his jaw and the end of the pickaxe comes through his eye. I, I don't understand how you could see that movie and not go, oh, that is just like the most wicked, awesome thing I've ever seen in my life. That is an amazing kill. And I'll put it over just about anything Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers has done. The other thing I really liked about this movie, it's got a great small town vibe. It was shot in this small town up in Canada, and I really enjoyed the vibe, the camaraderie amongst everybody. The miners when they're leaving work and they're going to the bar, and they're having their back and forth at the bar, and they're singing about the barfly Harriet who hasn't lost her cherry yet, and just there's some great jokes back and forth, and I really like it. There's a really cool love triangle in this movie too. I am going to review My Bloody Valentine from 1981. I'm not going to review the 2009 remake. It was just dumb and unnecessary. But I was going to do this for Valentine's Day, and I found out the hard way. When you've got a small channel like mine, you don't put out content the day of. Because 2 days before Friday the 13th, I put out my Friday the 13th video, and it started getting views. And then everybody started flooding YouTube with Friday the 13th stuff, and my video got shoved to the bottom. So I am going to do a My Bloody Valentine's review, but it's probably coming in a few weeks. So before I get into my top 2 slashers of 1981, and they're really, instead of 1 and 2, they're more like 1A and 1B. I'm going to get into my honorable mentions because there's not much separating them, and depending on the day, I might choose one over the other one. But one I wanted to talk about at length was I just saw over on Peacock, and that's Dark Knight of the Scarecrow, which was a made-for-TV movie, and it was really good. And I wouldn't call it a slasher so much. It's more psychological. Stars Larry Drake, who you know as Dr. Giggles, and he was in Darkman. He plays this mentally challenged person, and they think he's done something with this girl, and so he's hiding as a scarecrow in this field, and they put 21 bullets in him. And then, of course, his spirit comes out for revenge. And like I said, it's more psychological. There's not any like slashing deaths until the very last. There's some cool stuff where he's haunting them. One guy gets put into what we in the Midwest call a brush hog, and that's not going to end well for somebody. Google that if you don't know what that piece of machinery is. Another guy gets grain in this silo dumped on him, and he has a heart attack. But yeah, there's not really any slashing deaths until the end, so I could see where you'd say it's more of a thriller, but to me, it's part of that slasher genre, and I'd put it here. I almost put it over The Prowler at number 5. That's how much I enjoyed this movie. Like I said, I think it's on Tubi and Peacock. Check it out. 2 others I'd just like to briefly name. I'm not going to spend too much time on them, but they're really good. Wes Craven's Deadly Blessing, with the whole Amish community, that's a good one, and I really liked Final Exam as well. And as I said, my 1 and 2 could change on any given day. But as of today, my number 2 is Halloween 2, directed by Rick Rosenthal, produced by John Carpenter. This movie is one of the greatest slashers, and I almost rate it up there with Halloween. I like to watch them back to back. One begins right as the other one ends. I shot him 6 times. Just great stuff. That seems like just one long, almost 3-hour movie when you watch it that way. And this movie's so creepy. The hospital, I've never seen a hospital that's that dark with so few people on duty. And of course, you got Michael Myers walking around town and everything, and Laurie Strode, who's completely helpless. Um, Jamie Lee Curtis, she didn't have much to do in this movie. The one of the reasons I put it second instead of first is the final girl in my next one is leaps and bounds ahead of Laurie Strode in this movie. Michael Myers is more menacing to me in this one. The things that he does to everybody, the kills that he has, with hammers and drowning people in hot tubs, and sticking people in the back with scalpels and holding them up until their clogs drop. Just some great deaths. And it's funny because Halloween begat Friday the 13th, which kind of changed things and made things, this was more of a slow burn. This was more slasherish. Well, to compete, Halloween got more like Friday the 13th. And that's what we got here in Halloween 2. And that's probably one of the reasons I like it so much because, as you can tell, I'm pretty big Friday the 13th fan. I've really came around on Halloween in the last few years. Brandon Smith, one of my really good friends, has probably had a whole lot to do with that. It really saddens me that John Carpenter doesn't want anything to do with Halloween 2 anymore, how he kind of disowns the movie. Because, like I said earlier, to me, this is almost as good as Halloween 1. If you're looking for the slasher thing, you might like it even more. So that's why it's here at number 2 for me, and that only leaves one. And I think you know what it is. So my number 1 slasher of 1981 is this puppy right here, Friday the 13th Part 2. And this is the movie where we finally get Jason Voorhees. He's the sackhead Jason in this one, which to me, I've done a ranking of these, and I said to me, the sackhead is almost as scary as the hockey mask. And one reason I love this movie so much more than the original Friday the 13th is the characters and the character development in this thing. You've got Jenny, who's studying to be a child psychologist, and she uses that against Jason at the end, with his naive love of his mother and everything. It almost gets away with it. You've got Paul helping lead the camp. He's a lot better than the guy they had in that first movie. You've got the characters of Mark and Vicky, who've got a little love story going on as well. And of course, he's the handicapped guy in a wheelchair. And just as he's about to get lucky, he's outside and gets the machete in the face in one of the greatest deaths in any slasher franchise. Like I said, the one from My Bloody Valentine's great. This one's right there with it. So he rolls terribly down the stairs. I shouldn't laugh, but I have to. It's such a good kill. They do a good job of setting this movie up, with the character development and everything. And then once the main characters go to that bar and all hell starts breaking loose while they're there back at the cabin, that's where the movie really takes off and really goes to another level. The entire last act of this movie I just absolutely love, where it's just Jenny and Paul and Jason. And for a lot of it, it's just Jenny and Jason. And he's chasing her all around the camp, and she's hiding under the bed. And she's so scared, she literally pisses her pants. And that's kind of how Jason catches her. And as I said earlier, this movie's just smart. Like, there's a scene earlier where she's cutting wood with the chainsaw, and that comes into play later on when she's chasing after Jason in the cabin, and he's kind of begging off like Nature Boy Ric Flair, which is something you don't see after this anymore in that character, which kind of shows his progression as a ruthless killer to me. I really love this film. I think Halloween 2 is probably a better made film, but I'll probably always love Friday the 13th Part 2 just a little bit more, and that's why it's my top slasher of 1981. So, guys, that was my list for my top 5 slashers of the year 1981. Let me know if you agree, disagree, down in the comments. I like hearing from you guys. Yeah, let me know if you'd like to see me do more slasher stuff like this, and I'll take it under consideration. Until then, I'm Andrew, and I'll see you down the line.